The room glows before the sun has risen. A hand reaches through the dark, not for a spear, not for a stone blade, not for the warm ash of last night's fire, but for a rectangle of glass that has been awake all night. Its surface blooms with messages, alerts, warnings, faces, weather, markets, wars, strangers arguing, strangers smiling in brighter rooms. The body beneath the blanket is ancient in its architecture, built from nerves, hormones, hunger, fear, memory, and longing shaped over immense stretches of time. Yet the first thing it meets each morning is not wind, bird song, human breath nearby, or the slow gold edge of dawn. It meets a private artificial sky, held in one hand, carrying more signals than any Paleolithic camp faced in a lifetime. This is where the mystery begins, not in a cave sealed beneath Ice Age sediment, but in the light of an ordinary bedroom. A human being wakes in the digital age and feels, before any thought becomes clear, that something is slightly wrong. The bed is safe. Food waits nearby. No predator circles the doorway. Yet the pulse is already rising. The mind is sorting threats. The day has not begun. And the nervous system is behaving as if the group has called an emergency council in the dark. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because the strange thing about this story is that its ruins are not only buried under stone, some of them are still active inside us. To understand why modern life can feel so unnatural, it is tempting to say that human beings have Stone Age brains trapped in a technological world. The phrase is powerful because it feels true. It compresses a vast tension into a single image, a Paleolithic mind staring into a screen, a hunter-gatherer nervous system answering emails, a body once tuned to forests and rivers now seated under fluorescent light, while deadlines gather like weather. But the truth is more subtle. Humans are not fossils with smartphones. The brain is not a museum piece perfectly preserved from 40,000 years ago. Human beings are flexible, inventive, socially brilliant, and astonishingly good at adapting. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how far any modern pattern can be traced back to deep, evolutionary conditions. Still, what survives suggests that bodies and minds shaped across pre-industrial environments have been pushed, very quickly, into settings unlike anything that formed them. The mismatch is not simply that the modern world is new. Human life has always changed. Fire, tools, farming, cities, writing, industry, and medicine all remade the human world long before the smartphone arrived. But the digital age changes attention itself, pulling the eyes away from the horizon and into streams of symbols that never rest. Each shift offers gifts, and each gift carries a cost. No single explanation fully accounts for the unease of modern life, but evolutionary mismatch gives the unease a deeper frame. It asks what happens when environments change faster than the slow biological systems that help organisms flourish. Imagine the older world not as a paradise, because it was never that, but as a landscape of constraints. Hunger was real, injury could be serious, weather mattered, cooperation was survival. The body learned daylight and darkness from the actual sky. Food demanded effort and season. Social life unfolded among familiar faces, in groups small enough for reputation to have memory. Danger was immediate, physical, and close. It came as a sound in the brush, a hostile encounter, a storm, a failed hunt, a river crossing, a winter without enough stored knowledge. Fear had objects, stress had moments. Exhaustion followed movement. rest followed darkness. Attention moved through a living environment, scanning tracks, gestures, clouds, fruiting trees, and the emotional weather of nearby people. Now set that same organism inside a city apartment, a commute, an office, a feed, a marketplace of infinite food, comparison, and novelty. The old systems still do their work. They search for safety, status, belonging, calories, rhythm, meaning, and signs of threat. But the signals have multiplied and changed shape. A notification is not a predator, yet it can pull attention like a snapped twig in tall grass. A critical email is not exile from the group, yet the body can receive it as social danger. A crowded train is not a raid, yet the nervous system may register too many unknown bodies too close. A glowing screen at midnight is not sunrise, yet cells sensitive to light may hear it as a command to stay awake. A packet of engineered sweetness is not rare honey after a difficult climb, yet ancient reward circuits may treat it as a prize. This is the quiet drama of being human now. The modern world is not merely around the mind, it enters the mind. It enters through the eyes as artificial light, through the ears as mechanical noise, through the stomach as dense processed food, through the skin as stillness, through the calendar as pressure, through the phone as social weather without seasons. It is possible to sit motionless and feel hunted. It is possible to be surrounded by people and feel socially starved. It is possible to possess more information than any ancestor could have imagined and feel less certain about what matters. The paradox is not proof that the past was better. It is evidence that human well-being depends on fit, on rhythm, on environments that speak a language the body can understand. Some researchers describe this as environmental mismatch, a gap between the conditions under which traits evolved and the conditions in which those traits now operate. The idea does not mean every modern problem comes from prehistory, or that every ancestral habit was healthy, or that the solution is to abandon medicine, cities, technology, or civilization. Instead, Mismatch asks a careful question. When a trait once helped organisms survive, what happens if the environment changes so quickly that the same trait produces strain? Appetite for calorie-rich food was sensible in scarcity. Sensitivity to social judgment helped people stay connected. Alertness to threat helped bodies react before thought arrived. Desire for novelty supported exploration and learning. Under modern conditions, these useful tendencies may be amplified, redirected, or exhausted. The feeling of being out of place, then, may not be weakness. It may be information. It may be the body reporting that the world has become loud in the wrong frequencies. The anxiety before opening messages, the numbness after hours of scrolling, the fatigue after a day without physical danger, the loneliness inside crowded networks, the hunger that survives abundance, the insomnia beneath artificial stars all may be fragments of a larger pattern. Culture, poverty, wealth, health, work, family, climate, and personal history all shape the experience. Careful scholars warn against turning every discomfort into an evolutionary story, but the broad outline is difficult to ignore. The human organism arose in relation to earth, light, movement, faces, effort, seasons, and small communities. The modern world often replaces those relations with abstraction, acceleration, and simulation. At sunrise, the city begins to move. Screens ignite across bedrooms, trains, kitchens, and desks. Millions of people enter a day built from signals their ancestors never had to decode. Yet inside each person, something older continues to listen, It listens for footsteps behind leaves. It listens for approval in the eyes of others. It listens for the sun. It listens for hunger, danger, warmth, belonging, fatigue, and the edge of night. The digital age has not erased the Paleolithic mind. It has awakened it in a strange new room, under a light that does not quite know when morning begins. Long before the first screen glowed in a human hand, the mind woke into a world that answered back. Morning was not an alarm tone, but a spreading change in the air, a slow cooling or warming of the ground, the first movement of insects, birds, water, wind, and people stirring nearby. The human nervous system did not evolve in silence, but it evolved inside patterns. Light rose from one direction and faded into another. Food appeared in seasons, not in endless aisles. Social news travelled through voices, faces, posture, absence, and presence, not through an infinite public square of strangers. The world was dangerous, but it was also legible in ways the modern world often is not. A broken branch, a track in mud, the smell of rain, the mood of a companion, the direction of smoke, the heaviness of clouds, all were forms of information. Attention was not a private mental resource to be spent under glass. It was a living contact with surroundings. This older baseline matters because it gives shape to the sense of modern displacement. It does not tell us that Paleolithic life was gentle. It was not. Human groups faced cold, heat, hunger, injury, uncertain births, predators in some landscapes, conflict in some periods, and the constant work of staying alive with limited material tools. No careful account should turn deep prehistory into a wellness retreat with stone tools, but it is just as misleading to imagine early humans as frightened animals stumbling through misery. They were knowledgeable, social, observant, technically skilled, emotionally complex, and deeply adapted to the worlds they inhabited. What survives in the record suggests not a simple struggle, but a long intimacy between mind and environment. For most of human evolutionary history, attention had to move. It followed paths across terrain. It widened when entering open ground and narrowed when shaping a tool or reading a footprint. It shifted between practical tasks and social awareness. The eyes scanned horizons, tree lines, animal movement, water surfaces, and the hands of others. This was not distraction in the modern sense. It was adaptive vigilance, flexible and embodied. A person could not survive by staring at a single bright surface for hours while ignoring the body. The environment demanded a balance. Watch the world, watch the group, watch the weather, watch the self. Attention was braided with movement. Emotion, too, had a landscape. Fear was not merely an internal state. It had distance, direction, and texture. Anxiety could rise from uncertainty, but danger often came with signs that could be interpreted. A storm darkened the sky. An animal left tracks. A rival group might be heard or seen. A sick companion changed colour, breath, or movement. The body's alarm systems evolved to prepare action, freeze, flee, hide, gather close, make a plan, call others, defend, climb, wait. In many modern settings, those same alarm systems activate without a clear action that completes the cycle. A message can threaten reputation, but there may be nowhere to run. Debt can press on the chest, but no single movement removes it. News can summon fear from continents away, and the body may still respond as if the danger has entered the camp. Hunger was shaped by scarcity and effort. The Paleolithic diet was not one diet. because human groups lived in ice margins, coasts, woodlands, savannas, mountains, river valleys, and deserts. Scholars still debate the exact range of ancestral diets across regions and periods, and the evidence remains incomplete because plants, fats, and daily meals rarely preserve cleanly in the archaeological record. But the broad pattern is clear enough. Food usually required knowledge, labour, movement, cooperation, timing, and risk. Sweetness, fat, salt, and dense calories were valuable because they were not endlessly available. Appetite was a survival intelligence. Desire pointed toward energy, and energy mattered. In the modern world, that old intelligence can be surrounded by foods designed to be more intense, more available, and easier to consume than almost anything in the ancestral environment. The body reaches for what once helped it endure. But the setting has changed the meaning of the signal. Sleep followed another rhythm. The night was not absolute peace, but it had boundaries. Fire altered those boundaries, allowing conversation, warmth, protection, and perhaps storytelling long after sunset. Still, darkness was a real presence, and light had cost. The body's internal clocks were tuned by sunrise, dusk, temperature, activity, and social routine. People did not live by the exact same sleep patterns everywhere. Studies of recent small-scale societies suggest variation, flexibility, nighttime waking, and seasonal differences. The point is not that everyone slept perfectly before electricity. The point is that the signals governing sleep were more closely tied to the natural day. Modern artificial light, especially at night, changes that conversation. The body may be tired while the eyes keep receiving a false command to remain alert. Movement was not exercise, it was life itself. Walking to water, carrying gathered food, climbing, digging, kneeling, squatting, throwing, tracking, building shelters, processing hides, shaping stone, tending fire, moving camp, following herds, collecting plants, and searching coastlines all joined the body to survival. No one needed a separate hour for fitness, because the day itself demanded varied motion. This does not mean Paleolithic bodies were free from strain. Bones could bear marks of hard labour. Teeth wore down. Joints suffered. Injuries happened. But the baseline was active and diverse. Modern stillness is unusual not because sitting never occurred, but because whole days can now pass with the body barely travelling through space, while the mind absorbs enormous pressure. Social life was perhaps the deepest environment of all. Human beings are not merely individuals who happen to gather. They are social organisms whose brains are built to track alliances, trust, fairness, kinship, reputation, obligation, affection, and exclusion. In smaller ancestral groups, social information was intense but bounded. A person's world contained known faces, remembered histories, repeated encounters, and relationships that carried practical consequences. Approval mattered because belonging mattered. Shame could hurt because group life was survival. Generosity, skill, humour, patience, courage, knowledge, and reliability could all become forms of status. The mind learned to ask, often beneath awareness, where it stood among others. Modern social life keeps the ancient hunger for belonging but removes many of the old limits. A person can now compare a private bad morning with the polished image of thousands of others. The brain reads faces, numbers, symbols, reactions, and silence as social signals, even when those signals are partial, distorted, or produced by algorithms rather than community. The ancestral mind didn't evolve for complete privacy. But it also did not evolve for permanent exposure. It did not evolve to be judged by invisible crowds or to watch the success of strangers every few seconds. No single explanation fully accounts for loneliness or status anxiety today. But the mismatch between small group social instincts and mass digital comparison is one of the most revealing clues. The Paleolithic world also gave human life a kind of material feedback that modern life often thins out. A tool either cut or failed, a fire caught or died, a path led somewhere or did not. Food filled the stomach, a shelter blocked wind, a repaired object returned to use. Effort met matter. The hands knew whether work had succeeded. Much of modern labour is more abstract. Value may pass through documents, dashboards, metrics, messages, and systems too large to see. This abstraction is not meaningless. It builds hospitals, satellites, books, vaccines, and cities, but it can leave the older mind searching for the weight of accomplishment. Something in the body still wants to see the shaped stone, the gathered wood, the shared meal, the repaired roof, the visible result of effort. So the ancestral baseline is not a lost Eden. It is a set of relationships, body to terrain, hunger to effort, fear to action, sleep to light, identity to community, attention to a living world. Human beings were never perfectly matched to their environments. An evolutionary history is full of compromise. Yet the pace of recent change has created surroundings that can confuse systems built for older patterns. The ancient mind does not ask to return to the Ice Age. It asks, more quietly, for signals it can understand real daylight, real rest, real movement, real faces, real limits, real belonging, and a world that does not call every moment an emergency. The phrase Stone Age brain survives because it has force. It gives modern unease an ancient silhouette. It suggests that beneath every train ride, office meeting, supermarket aisle, and midnight scroll, there is an older mind still trying to solve older problems, but taken too literally, the phrase becomes a trap. Human beings are not unchanged relics. The mind that looks at a phone is not simply a hunter-gatherer mind with electricity poured over it. It is a learning, plastic, cultural, developing system shaped by genes, childhood, language, institutions, memory, habit, and the particular world it inhabits. The brain changes across a lifetime. Bodies adjust to diet, disease, altitude, temperature, labour, and social expectations. Culture itself becomes part of the environment in which biology operates. So the mystery is not that ancient brains have failed to update. The deeper mystery is how an organism so flexible can still feel strained by the very world it created. Evolutionary mismatch begins with a simple observation. Traits evolve in relation to environments, but environments do not remain still. A feature that once solved a problem may produce new problems when the surrounding conditions change. This is not unique to humans. Animals attracted to moonlight can become disoriented by artificial lamps. Birds that nest well in one landscape may struggle when the same cues lead them toward roads or buildings. A taste for ripe fruit is useful where fruit is seasonal and limited, but less useful where sweetness can be manufactured endlessly. In each case, the organism is not broken. Its inherited systems are responding to signals that once carried one meaning and now carry another. The cue remains powerful, but the world behind the cue has changed. For humans, the problem becomes unusually complex because humans are the great makers of changed environments. Other species modify landscapes, but human beings transform them at a staggering scale. Fire changed diets and night. tools extended hands, language enlarged memory, agriculture altered settlement, labor, disease, hierarchy, and food supply. Cities changed density and sanitation, while writing turned speech into durable symbols. Industry changed time, speed, energy, and noise. The digital age changed attention, social comparison, memory storage, and the number of people psychologically present in a single day. At each stage, the human organism adapted culturally with astonishing speed. But cultural adaptation can outrun biological adaptation. The result is not one dramatic rupture, but many small gaps opening at once. This is why scholars often speak not only of evolutionary mismatch, but of environmental mismatch. The word matters. It shifts the focus from a simplistic claim about ancient brains to a relationship between organisms and surroundings. A person is not merely a bundle of instincts dragged into the present. A person is a living system whose well-being depends on fit between light and circadian rhythms, food and appetite, work and attention, community and social need, movement and physiology, stress and recovery. When the fit weakens, the consequences may appear as fatigue, anxiety, craving, loneliness, inflammation, poor sleep, distraction, or a general sense that ordinary life is harder than it should be. The evidence remains incomplete for many specific links, and no single explanation fully accounts for the modern mind's discomfort. But Mismatch helps reveal why so many different problems seem to share a hidden architecture. It also prevents a mistake that appears often in popular stories about human evolution, the idea that the past holds a pure blueprint for how life should be lived. There was no single ancestral environment. Human beings evolved across changing climates, shifting coastlines, open grasslands, dense forests, cold steppe, tropical islands, mountain corridors, and river systems. Some groups hunted large animals, others relied heavily on plants, fish, shellfish, small game, tubers, nuts, or seasonal mixtures. Some moved often, some returned repeatedly to favoured places, and later some built increasingly settled lives. The Paleolithic was not one lifestyle frozen for all humans. It was a long, varied, experimental relationship with the earth. Any claim that there is one perfect ancestral diet, one perfect sleep pattern, one perfect social structure, or one perfect daily routine oversimplifies a record that is far more diverse. At the same time, variation does not mean there were no broad constants. Humans were born into bodies that needed movement, daylight, sleep, touch, food, learning, and social belonging. They were dependent on other humans for survival, not just during infancy, but throughout life. They learned through imitation, attention, and shared practice. They tracked reputation because cooperation mattered. They cared about immediate sensory evidence because survival unfolded in real places. They responded strongly to threat because delay could be costly. They were drawn to energy-dense food because energy was not guaranteed. They rested under real darkness, even if fire and social life made night flexible. These broad features do not describe every ancestral day, but they describe the kind of organism Homo sapiens became. The modern world often takes these old systems and stretches them beyond their original scale. Status once moved through a small web of remembered relationships. Now it can arrive as numbers beneath a photograph. Threat once carried direction and distance. Now it can appear as a headline about distant catastrophe, repeated all day. Food once required effort and season. Now a person can obtain intense flavour without meaningful labour. Light once followed the sun. Now it follows switches, screens, billboards, cars, and office ceilings. Work once often produced visible changes in matter. Now it may produce files, metrics, permissions, or invisible flows of value. Social life once involved bodies sharing space. Now it can become a performance before unseen audiences. The mind adapts, but adaptation has costs. One of the lesser-known subtleties of mismatch is that it does not always mean too much modernity. Sometimes it means the wrong kind of modernity, at the wrong intensity, at the wrong time. Technology can connect a lonely person with the real community, but it can also replace deeper contact with shallow stimulation. Artificial light can save lives, extend work, and make cities safer. But light at the wrong hour can weaken the body's sense of night. Calorie abundance can end famine, but engineered excess can overwhelm appetite regulation. Urban density can support culture, medicine, education, and opportunity, but it can also bring noise, isolation, and chronic sensory load. The same invention may heal in one context and harm in another. This is why the story cannot be told as a simple war between nature and civilization. A more careful image is synchronization. Human beings flourish when their inner rhythms and outer conditions can communicate clearly. Sunlight tells the body when to wake. Darkness permits sleep to deepen. Movement tells muscles, bones, metabolism, and mood that the body is alive in space. Real social contact tells the nervous system that belonging is more than a signal on a screen. Meaningful work tells attention that effort matters. Silence, or at least relief from constant noise, tells the threat system that not every moment requires scanning. When those signals are scrambled, the mind may keep functioning, but functioning is not the same as being at ease. This is why feeling out of place in the modern world should not be dismissed as nostalgia. It may be a biological and cultural warning, but a warning with nuance. The answer is not to pretend to become Paleolithic again. That would be impossible, and in many ways undesirable. Modern medicine, sanitation, literacy, law, science, art, and long-distance care are achievements worth defending. The task is more difficult and more interesting to understand which parts of modern life speak fluently to the old human organism, and which parts speak in distorted signals. The Paleolithic mind has not been frozen under the digital age. It has been asked to translate too much, too quickly, in a language of light, speed, abundance, and social noise that it is still learning to understand. The first cities rose as solutions. They gathered grain, labor, protection, ritual, trade, memory, and power into places where human life could become larger than a wandering camp or a seasonal settlement. Walls, streets, drains, courtyards, markets, temples, workshops, and houses were not mistakes in the human story. They were inventions of astonishing imagination. Yet every invention rearranges the body that lives inside it. When the built world replaces the open landscape, these senses do not simply relax into progress. They begin to negotiate with stone, brick, asphalt, glass, engines, electrical hum, artificial heat, sealed air, and crowds of unfamiliar faces. The city protects the body from many old dangers, but it introduces pressures that older nervous system may not easily recognize. For most of human history, the horizon was not decorative. It was practical information. Distance mattered. Weather could be seen arriving. Movement of animals, smoke, cloud, vegetation, and other people helped the mind orient itself. Even in forests, cliffs, caves, wetlands, or valleys where the view was broken, the environment still carried layered signs. The ground changed beneath the feet. Air shifted with water, plants, dust, and season. Sound travelled differently across open grass, snow, stone, and leaves. The body did not float inside a neutral container. It belonged to a place that gave constant feedback. Modern built environments often flatten that feedback. Floors are level, walls block distance, windows frame the world without requiring contact. Elevators remove climbing. Climate control makes summer and winter less physically legible. The result is comfort, but also a kind of sensory thinning. This thinning can be difficult to notice because cities are not quiet or empty. They're often too full. The problem is not lack of stimulus, but the wrong pattern of stimulus. A forest can be rich with sound, yet much of that sound carries soft variation, leaves moving, water running, insects pulsing, birds calling, distant movement broken by silence. A city can be rich with sound too, but it often arrives as mechanical persistence engines, brakes, horns, sirens, compressors, construction, ventilation, voices reflected from hard surfaces. The human ear evolved to notice sudden changes, possible approach, emotional tone, and danger in sound. In urban noise, those systems may remain half awake for hours. There may be no immediate threat, but the body keeps receiving fragments that resemble alerts. No single explanation fully accounts for urban stress, but chronic noise is one of the clearest ways a landscape can enter the nervous system without permission. Light changes as well. In older environments, brightness had direction and rhythm. Morning light rose low and warm, midday light sharpened, evening light softened, and darkness returned with authority. In the city, light becomes detached from time. Streetlights burn through the night, shops glow after sunset, screens flare in windows, office ceilings mimic a permanent week afternoon, cars sweep light across bedrooms, billboards turn attention into a commercial target. The body is not blind to this. It uses light as a biological instruction. Yet the city often speaks in contradictory commands: wake now, work now, look here, stay alert, ignore the hour. What survives in the record of human physiology suggests that these signals matter, even if scholars still debate the full scale of their effects across different people, places, and lifestyles. Air, too, becomes part of the mismatch. Humans have always breathed smoke from fires, dust from dry ground, pollen, damp cave air, volcanic particles, and the smells of animals, plants, and decay. The ancestral world was not chemically pure, but industrial and urban environments introduce mixtures at densities and durations that are historically unusual vehicle exhaust. Fine particulate matter, solvents, indoor pollutants, plastics, synthetic fragrances, construction dust, and air that has been filtered, cooled, heated, and recirculated through sealed buildings. The body reads the air not as an idea, but as chemistry. Lungs, blood vessels, immune systems, and brains participate in that reading. The evidence remains incomplete in many details, but modern environmental exposures are increasingly difficult to separate from questions of mood, cognition, inflammation, and long-term health. Crowding creates another contradiction. Human beings are intensely social, yet not all proximity is belonging. A subway car can place bodies inches apart while leaving every person socially alone. A busy street can fill the eyes with faces that carry no shared history. An apartment tower can stack hundreds of lives above one another while leaving neighbours unknown. In an ancestral group, unfamiliar faces were significant. They required attention. They might mean exchange, marriage ties, news, opportunity, danger, or negotiation. In modern cities, strangers become background, yet the nervous system may still register them. It has to ignore what it was built to notice. This constant suppression of social attention may be one reason a person can feel exhausted after doing nothing more dramatic than moving through a crowd. There is surprising detail hidden in this ordinary experience. The body may respond differently to density, depending on whether it includes control, trust, and escape. A crowded festival among trusted companions can feel energizing. A crowded train with no space to move can feel like pressure. A lively market can feel human. A sealed office with constant interruption can feel draining. The number of people is not the whole story. The pattern of relationship matters. The older social brain seems less troubled by closeness itself than by closeness without clear social meaning. Closeness without agency. Closeness without the cues of safety. The city often gives contact without connection. Nature contact, by contrast, appears to matter not because humans are sentimental about trees, but because natural environments may offer patterns the nervous system can process with less defensive effort. Curving forms, layered depth, moving water, bird song, soil, plant smell, and uneven terrain all provide a type of sensory engagement that is neither empty nor aggressively demanding. Even brief exposure to green or blue spaces can alter mood and attention for many people, though the strength and mechanisms of these effects remain debated. The point is not that every person must live in a forest. Human beings have created meaningful lives in deserts, tundra, coasts, farms, villages, and cities. The point is that a fully artificial environment may remove too many of the cues through which the body learned to regulate itself. The built world also changes time. In a landscape, movement has scale. Walking takes time. Distance teaches patience. Weather interrupts plans. Darkness closes certain possibilities. In modern urban life, infrastructure compresses distance and expands obligation. A person can cross a city underground, answer messages while moving, eat without pausing, work in buildings where the sky is barely visible, and return home having touched almost nothing alive except other hurried bodies. This compression is efficient, and efficiency has become one of civilization's great gods. But the body is not always comforted by efficiency. Sometimes it needs transitions. It needs the walk between tasks, the cooling of evening, the slight fatigue of useful movement, the mind-clearing interval that old environments imposed without asking. So the city stands as one of humanity's greatest achievements and one of its strangest experiments. It shelters, heals, educates, connects, and dazzles. It also overwhelms, isolates, accelerates, and dulls. It replaces landscape with system, horizon with corridor, weather with climate control, night with managed brightness, neighborhood with density, and bodily movement with transport. There is no simple verdict. The city is not an enemy of human nature, because human nature built it. But it may be a mirror that shows how quickly human intelligence can create conditions that human physiology then struggles to inhabit. Beneath the glass towers and apartment lights, the ancient mind keeps looking for breathable air, trustworthy faces, meaningful distance, and a sky that still knows how to turn dark. The city teaches the eyes to pass over strangers, but the older social brain does not forget what a stranger used to mean. It keeps noticing faces, posture, tone, closeness, avoidance, confidence, weakness, beauty, anger, laughter, and silence. It keeps asking who belongs, who threatens, who leads, who follows, who can be trusted, who has turned away. This social scanning is so automatic that it can feel like personality rather than biology. Yet beneath it lies one of the most powerful inheritances in the human mind, the need to understand other people before they become a danger. An ally, a rival, a teacher, a mate, a companion, or a witness to one's place in the group. Long before written law, digital profiles, identity documents, or professional titles, humans survived by reading one another. The human brain is not large only because tools were useful or landscapes were difficult. It is also large because other humans are complicated. A stone stays where it is placed. A branch does not remember an insult. A river may be dangerous, but it does not pretend. People are different. They hide intentions, change loyalties, share food, withhold help, forgive, deceive, comfort, mock, teach, admire, and exclude. To live among humans is to live inside moving minds. Some researchers have argued that social complexity helped shape the expansion of human cognition, though scholars still debate exactly how much weight to give social life compared with ecology, diet, technology, and climate. What survives in the record of human behavior, however, suggests that belonging was never a luxury. It was infrastructure. In smaller face-to-face communities, the social world had weight but also limits. A person could know who had helped during hunger, who told stories well, who handled tools with skill, who cared for others, who lost patience too easily, who understood animal movement, who remembered water sources, who could be relied upon at night. Reputation was not abstract. It lived in memory. It was carried by repeated action, witnessed over time. Status mattered, but it often attached to visible contributions: knowledge, generosity, courage, ritual power, craft, humor, endurance, healing, negotiation, or practical competence. This does not mean early groups were perfectly fair or peaceful. Human societies have always carried tensions, jealousy, rivalry, and conflict. But the scale of judgment was usually intimate enough for context to survive. Modern social life breaks that context into fragments. A person may be evaluated by numbers, titles, images, salaries, clothing, credentials, bodies, productivity, visibility, follower counts, home size, relationship status, and the invisible rankings of institutions. The mind built to track social standing in a bounded group now receives signals from neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, markets, media, and global networks. It sees more people than it can know. It compares itself with lives it cannot verify. It senses hierarchy everywhere, but often without the stabilizing knowledge of who someone really is, what they have endured, what they contribute, or what remains outside the frame. Status becomes less like reputation and more like weather, always present, constantly changing, impossible to hold. This is one reason modern comparison can be so corrosive. The older mind does not treat social rank as a shallow vanity. Rank once carried consequences. Being valued by the group could mean support, food sharing, protection, mating opportunity, influence, and help during illness or hardship. Being disliked, distrusted, or ignored could be costly. So the nervous system pays attention. It may react to exclusion with real pain, because social separation was not merely emotional in ancestral conditions. It could threaten survival. In the modern world, the same sensitivity can be triggered by subtler signals and unanswered message. a meeting where one is overlooked, a public metric, a cold tone, a photograph of others gathering elsewhere. The body may not distinguish cleanly between deep exclusion and minor social ambiguity. The evidence remains incomplete, and people vary greatly. But the pattern is familiar enough to feel ancient. Loneliness reveals the mismatch even more sharply. A person can live among millions and still lack the kind of social contact the nervous system recognizes as safety. Loneliness is not simply the absence of people. It is the absence of trusted, reciprocal, embodied connection. It is possible to speak all day and feel unknown. It is possible to be watched and not cared for. It is possible to maintain hundreds of weak ties and still lack the few strong bonds that tell the body it is not facing the world alone. A surprising detail is that weak ties can be useful and meaningful. Casual greetings, familiar faces, neighbours, co-workers, and brief friendly exchanges can improve the texture of a day. But weak ties cannot always substitute for deeper belonging. The social brain seems to need layers, intimate bonds, reliable companions, familiar community, and a broader sense of place. Modern institutions often move people faster than those layers can form. Education, employment, housing costs, migration, ambition, crisis, and opportunity all pull individuals away from long-term communities. This mobility can liberate. It can allow escape from rigid roles, dangerous households, stagnant towns, or inherited limitations. But it can also leave the mind rebuilding belonging again and again. The older social world was not always kind, yet it was often durable. Modern life offers freedom at the price of repeated social reconstruction. A person may have to invent a tribe in every new city, workplace, platform, or phase of life. Some succeed beautifully. Others remain surrounded by contact and starved of attachment. The social brain is also overloaded by scale. One famous idea suggests that human beings can maintain only a limited number of stable social relationships, though the exact number and its meaning remain debated. Whatever the precise limit, lived experience points in the same direction attention cannot care deeply about everyone. Yet modern media presents suffering, success, outrage, celebration, disaster, scandal, beauty, and grief from thousands of lives. The moral emotions are pulled outward beyond their old radius. Compassion becomes exhausted, envy becomes habitual, anger becomes available on demand. The mind is asked to respond socially to people who are psychologically present but relationally absent. It is an impossible banquet of human signals, and much of it cannot be metabolized. Even ordinary politeness becomes work under these conditions. In a small group, social norms may be dense but familiar. In a pluralistic modern world, people move between codes constantly professional language, family expectations, online etiquette, bureaucratic forms, customer behavior, public performance, private restraint. This flexibility is a remarkable human achievement, but it consumes attention. The self becomes a manager of impressions across many stages. One version of the person appears at work, another in messages, another in family life, another in public spaces, another in the silent theatre of self-comparison. No single version is false, exactly, but the constant switching can make identity feel less like a rooted presence and more like a set of passwords. This is why the ache of modern social life often has a strange contradiction at its centre. People are more visible and less known, more connected and less held, more informed about others and less certain where they belong. The ancient social brain keeps doing what it was shaped to do, watching the group, searching for trust, fearing exclusion, measuring status, longing for recognition, trying to become valuable in the eyes of others. But the group has expanded beyond recognition. It has become a workplace, a market, a city, a nation, a feed, an audience, an algorithmic crowd. The mind still listens for the campfire circle, for the small ring of faces where a person's presence is understood without explanation. Instead, it hears 1,000 signals at once, and somewhere beneath the noise, it keeps asking whether it is safe to belong. The screen does something older than it looks. It gathers faces, voices, warnings, invitations, insults, admiration, gossip, spectacle, grief, status, desire, and belonging into one glowing surface, then places that surface within reach of the hand. It appears to be a tool, and it is a tool, but it is also a social habitat. It becomes a kind of artificial tribe, assembled not by kinship, shared labour, landscape, season, or long memory, but by code. The ancient social brain enters this habitat eagerly because it recognises so many of the signals. A face is still a face. Approval is still approval. Rejection still stings. News of conflict still sharpens attention. A sign that others are watching still changes behaviour. The strange part is not that people care about the screen. The strange part is that the screen has learned so precisely what the human mind was already prepared to care about. In older social worlds, attention to other people was not optional. To miss a change in mood, alliance, desire, or danger could matter. A person needed to know who was generous, who was unreliable, who was grieving, who was angry, who had succeeded, who had failed, who was forming a bond, who was being pushed outward. Gossip, in the neutral anthropological sense, was not merely idle talk. It helped people map the moral and social landscape. It carried information about trust and reputation. The modern feed takes that ancient appetite for social information and removes almost every natural limit around it. There is no final conversation, no end of the gathering, no point at which the fire burns low and bodies drift towards sleep. The tribe keeps speaking after midnight. Notifications are among the most elegant disturbances ever invented. They are small, bright, brief, and uncertain. They may contain affection, obligation, opportunity, criticism, money, work, danger, boredom, or nothing at all. That uncertainty matters. The brain is powerfully drawn to variable rewards, to signals that might be meaningful but cannot be predicted with confidence. In an older landscape, uncertain signals deserved attention because they might reveal food, threat, or social change. On a phone, the same pull can be generated by a red dot, a vibration, a number, a preview line. The body turns toward it before judgment catches up. Scholars still debate how best to measure the long-term mental health effects of digital technology, and the evidence remains mixed in places. But the design logic is not mysterious. The screen competes for attention by speaking in the language of possible importance. The like button is even simpler, and perhaps more unsettling. It compresses recognition into a number. In a face-to-face group, approval would arrive through tone, touch, laughter, shared food, imitation, eye contact, invitation, patience, and remembered loyalty. It had texture. It could be ambiguous, but it was embedded in relationship. Online approval becomes countable, comparable, and public. A person can watch social value rise or stall beneath an image of their own life. The ancient mind sees evidence of being seen. It may feel warmth, relief, hunger, or alarm. It may begin to shape behavior toward the signals that reward it. What was once a subtle web of belonging becomes a scoreboard that never admits it is a scoreboard. Followers and audiences deepen the distortion. Human beings evolved to care about reputation among people whose judgments might return in real encounters. Digital platforms allow reputation to expand into strange new scales. A person can be watched by strangers who know almost nothing about them. They can become visible without becoming known. They can receive praise without intimacy and hostility without context. For some, this brings opportunity, livelihood, creativity, and community. For others, it brings a sense of living under a sky of eyes. The evidence remains incomplete because digital life is not one thing. It includes friendship, education, art, activism, humour, work, flirtation, grief, distraction, and escape. But as a mismatch environment, it is remarkable it offers social exposure without the stabilizing bonds of shared place. Outrage is another ancient current running through modern wires. Anger evolved in part as a response to threat, injustice, boundary violation, and status conflict. Moral emotion can protect groups. It can mobilize defense, repair norms, and signal that certain lines matter. Yet online systems can detach anger from proportion and proximity. A person can encounter dozens of provocations before breakfast, many selected because they are likely to hold attention. Each one invites judgment. Each one offers the body a small surge of readiness. But there is often no real action that resolves the feeling. The anger cannot be brought to a council, a negotiation, a repaired relationship, or a direct change in the local world. It circulates. It becomes weather inside the nervous system. No single explanation fully accounts for modern irritability or polarization. But outrage delivered at scale is one way ancient moral instincts can be overfed. There is also the matter of faces. The human brain is exquisitely sensitive to them. It finds them in clouds, stone, wood grain, headlights, and shadows. A face is an event. It promises mind behind matter. Screens offer faces, endlessly beautiful faces, grieving faces, furious faces, expert faces, comic faces, artificial faces, filtered faces, faces speaking inches from the viewer in a room where no one is actually present. This produces an intimacy without reciprocity. A person may spend hours with the expressions of others while their own body sits alone. The nervous system receives social stimulation, but not always social nourishment. It is a meal made of scent and colour, sometimes satisfying for a moment, sometimes leaving hunger sharper than before. Digital tribes can also simulate belonging with astonishing efficiency. A community can form around a game, a channel, a belief, a craft, a crisis, a joke, a fandom, a diagnosis, a political identity, a spiritual longing, or a shared sense of alienation. These communities can be real. They can save people from isolation, especially those who cannot find understanding nearby. It would be wrong to dismiss online belonging as fake simply because it travels through machines. Humans have always used tools to extend social life. Speech, paint, drums, letters, books, radio, and film all carried presence beyond the body. The difference is speed, scale, persistence, and design. Digital belonging can be deep, but it can also be fragile, performative, and dependent on constant participation. The artificial tribe may welcome a person warmly, then vanish into silence when the algorithm shifts. One lesser-known part of the problem is that social media does not only show people other people, it teaches people to watch themselves from the outside. The self becomes content before it becomes memory. A meal is imagined as an image. A walk is measured as proof. A private thought becomes potential post. Even rest can become something to document. This externalized self-awareness is not entirely new. Humans have always cared how they appear. But the digital mirror is persistent and portable. It encourages a person to divide experience into living and displaying, feeling and branding, being and being seen. The older mind sought recognition because recognition secured place in the group. The modern platform can transform that need into continuous self-surveillance. Still, the screen is not simply an enemy. It allows scattered families to see one another. It lets knowledge cross borders instantly. It gives the isolated a chance to find language for their condition. It preserves memories, teaches skills, coordinates help, exposes abuses, and lets small voices travel farther than old hierarchies allowed. Digital technology harms and heals because it touches the same ancient systems belonging, curiosity, fear, play, status, cooperation, storytelling, and care. The mismatch lies not in connection itself, but in connection stripped of rhythm, limit, embodiment, and rest. So the artificial tribe glows in the palm, neither demon nor saviour. It is a campfire that never burns down, a marketplace without closing, a crowd without edges, a mirror that answers back, a council where strangers shout from behind masks, a memory cave painted fresh every second. The Paleolithic mind approaches it with genuine needs. It wants news of the group. It wants signs of safety. It wants laughter, teaching, warning, beauty, and witness. But the screen gives these in forms too dense and too endless for the older rhythms of attention. And somewhere after the 100th face, the 1000th signal, the uncounted small comparison, the mind may feel both surrounded and alone, as if it has found a tribe made of light and still cannot find its way home. Work once left more evidence on the hands. It blackened palms with charcoal, roughened skin with fibre and stone, stained fingers with plant sap, pressed weight into shoulders, and marked the body with the ordinary signatures of effort. A shelter stood where no shelter had stood before. A hide became softer, a blade edge grew sharper, a basket filled, a fire caught. A path through snow or grass or scrubland became a memory in the muscles. Human work was never simple, never only physical, and never free from boredom or social pressure, but it usually remained tied to visible change in the world. Effort touched matter, and matter answered. The body could feel that something had been done. In the modern digital workplace, effort often disappears into systems too abstract to satisfy the older senses. A person sits before a screen and moves symbols across fields of light. Messages are answered, files renamed, forms submitted, meetings attended, metrics adjusted, documents approved, permissions requested, calendars rearranged, numbers reconciled, dashboards refreshed. At the end of the day, the body may be exhausted, but the room looks the same. The hands have not shaped stone, gathered wood, carried water, or built a wall. The mind has worked intensely, but the organism that evolved to connect labour with movement, tools, social rhythm, and visible consequence may struggle to understand where all the effort went. This does not mean modern work is meaningless. Much of it is profoundly meaningful. Hospitals run through records and schedules, bridges, aircraft, books, films, public health systems, weather models, farms, supply chains, museums, schools, and scientific discoveries all depend on invisible coordination. A spreadsheet can feed people. A line of code can protect information. A message sent at the right time can prevent harm, repair trust, or move a whole institution. The problem is not that abstract work lacks value. The problem is that the human nervous system did not evolve to feel value through abstraction alone. It often needs feedback that is sensory, social, and complete. Without that, a day can be full of productivity and still feel strangely empty. The older campfire world had its own pressures, but work and life were less divided into separate psychological countries. Food, care, repair, teaching, movement, ritual, and storytelling overlapped. Tasks were not always pleasant, yet they often unfolded near others, in shared space, with direct awareness of why the task mattered. A tool was made because someone needed it. Food was processed because people would eat. A shelter was repaired because wind was coming. The link between effort and survival could be severe, but it was rarely obscure. Modern labour often asks people to serve purposes distributed across networks so large that no one can fully see them. The worker becomes one node in an enormous machine of exchange, compliance, communication, and measurement. That invisibility changes attention. Digital work rewards constant responsiveness. The message must be answered. The notification must be checked. The meeting begins before the previous thought has settled. A task is interrupted by another task that appears more urgent because it arrives with sound, colour, or someone else's impatience. The mind becomes a switching device. It moves from document to message, from message to meeting, from meeting to search, from search to platform, from platform back to document, each transition carrying a small cost, attention, once braided with walking, watching, handling, listening, and waiting, becomes chopped into bright pieces. Scholars still debate the long-term cognitive consequences of digital work, and the evidence remains incomplete. But many people recognize the lived result: the mind is busy all day, and somehow never feels deeply engaged. There is a peculiar fatigue that comes from this kind of fragmentation. It is not the clean fatigue of walking a long distance or carrying a heavy load. It is thinner, more restless, harder to resolve. The body sits still while the mind sprints. The eyes remain fixed at a near distance. The shoulders hold tension meant for action. Breathing becomes shallow without anyone noticing. Stress rises, but the muscles do not complete the old sequence of response. At day's end, there may be tiredness without satisfying exertion, agitation without movement, hunger without true energy need, and a craving for stimulation after too much stimulation has already occurred. Work also changes when the group is no longer physically present. Remote and digital labour can offer freedom, safety, flexibility, and relief from exhausting commutes. For many people, it is a genuine improvement, but it can also strip work of the small social cues that once helped regulate trust and belonging. A glance across a room, a shared pause, a visible expression of effort, the informal repair of tension, the small humour after a difficult task, these can be weakened when interaction is compressed into boxes, messages, and scheduled calls. The mind receives contact, but not always enough presence. It may spend the day communicating and still feel socially undernourished. The modern workplace also creates a new kind of surveillance, not always by a person, but by measurement, time, output, response speed, engagement, performance indicators, ratings, rankings, and availability can become substitutes for trust. Measurement can be useful, It can reveal patterns, improve systems, and make invisible labour visible. But when everything becomes countable, the worker may begin to experience the self as a set of metrics. This speaks directly to the ancient status mind. Numbers can feel like reputation. Response speed can feel like loyalty. Productivity can feel like worth. The body may sit in a safe room, but the social brain hears the footsteps of judgment. One lesser-known mismatch lies in the disappearance of natural stopping points. In physical work, materials impose limits. The basket is full. The sun sets. The path is finished. The animal is butchered. The firewood pile is built. The tool is sharpened. The body has done enough because the world itself says enough. Digital work rarely says this. There's always another message, another improvement, another file, another update, another possible risk, another person waiting, another metric that could be better. The task does not end. The worker merely withdraws from it. This makes rest feel like failure rather than completion. The campfire used to gather people after effort. The laptop simply waits in sleep mode. Modern labour can also detach people from the seasons. Under artificial light and climate control, January and July may feel nearly identical inside the office. The same chair, the same screen, the same posture, the same deadlines repeat while the living world changes outside. Yet human beings are seasonal organisms more than they often admit. Mood, sleep, appetite, energy, social life, and movement can shift with light and weather. A work culture that treats the body as identical every day of the year may produce efficiency on paper, while ignoring rhythms older than paper itself. The deeper issue is not whether humans should return to ancient work. Much of that work was harsh, uncertain, and physically costly. The point is that work becomes more humane when it gives the mind something it can recognize: visible progress, embodied movement, meaningful cooperation, trust, rhythm, completion, and a connection between effort and value. A person does not need to shape flint to feel whole, but some part of the old organism still wants the day's labour to leave a trace more real than an emptied inbox. It wants the group to be more than calendar invitations. It wants skill to matter as more than speed. It wants rest to arrive not as collapse, but as the natural closing of a circle. In the glow of the modern workstation, the ancient mind continues its quiet search for the campfire after work, for the place where effort becomes story, where others can see what was carried, repaired, solved, endured, or made. Without that place, even successful labour can feel ghostly. The person has worked, but the work has passed through invisible channels into invisible systems, leaving the body behind in a chair, wondering why survival in a world of comfort can still feel so strangely tiring. The laptop sleeps before the body does. Its lid closes with a soft mechanical finality, but the room remains bright. The phone still glows, the router blinks in the corner, a street lamp leaks through the curtain, and somewhere outside, the city continues to pretend that night is only a lighting choice. Work may have ended, but the signals of wakefulness remain. The ancient mind, already tired from invisible labour and social scanning, now waits for darkness that does not fully arrive. It has crossed another threshold of the modern world the hour when the sun is gone, but the body is still being told to stay alert. For most of life on Earth, time was written in light. Dawn was not merely beautiful, it was instruction. Sunlight entered the eyes and helped set internal clocks that regulate sleep, temperature, alertness, hormones, digestion, immune activity, mood, and countless smaller rhythms hidden beneath awareness. Dusk gave a different instruction. Darkness did not simply mean the absence of vision. It allowed the body to shift state, to lower vigilance in some ways and deepen repair in others. Human beings changed night with fire long before electricity, and firelight mattered. It extended social life, protected camps, cooked food, and made storytelling possible after sunset. But fire is dim compared with modern lighting, and it does not usually flood the eyes with the blue-white precision of a screen held inches from the face at midnight. Circadian mismatch begins when the body's inner timing no longer lines up cleanly with the outer world it receives. The problem is not just sleeping too little. Though many people do, it is sleeping, waking, eating, working, and staring into light at hours when older biological systems expect something else. Scholars still debate how best to compare modern sleep with ancestral sleep, and the evidence remains incomplete because prehistoric nights left no diaries. Even studies of present-day small-scale societies show variation rather than one perfect ancestral pattern. Some people sleep in one long block, others wake during the night, and seasons change the shape of rest. But the broad signal remains powerful. Human physiology is tuned by the cycle of light and dark, and modern life has weakened that cycle. A surprising detail complicates the common story. Some research suggests that people in large industrial societies may not always sleep less than people in non-industrial settings. In some comparisons, modern sleepers can show long and efficient sleep, at least by certain measurements. Yet their circadian function may be weaker, less tightly anchored to natural light. This matters because sleep duration is only one part of the story. A person can spend enough hours in bed and still live under confused timing. The body may not know when the day truly begins if morning arrives through a dim bedroom and a phone screen. It may not know when night truly begins if evening is filled with ceiling lights, streaming video, late meals, and messages from other time zones. Sunlight is not simply brightness. It is a biological event with intensity, angle, color, and timing. Outdoor daylight, even on an overcast day, can be far stronger than indoor light. Morning exposure helps anchor the body's clock, while daytime light supports alertness and later sleep. Some recent studies have found links between more daylight exposure and better sleep measures, though no single study can settle the entire question. What survives across the evidence suggests a practical truth older than laboratories. The body wants to meet the real day. Yet many modern people live as if daylight were optional. They wake indoors, travel inside vehicles, work under artificial illumination, and reach evening having received less sunlight than their biology expects. Then night arrives, and the pattern reverses. Instead of darkness, the body receives artificial light after sunset. Streetlights, office towers, shops, televisions, tablets, and phones extend daytime into hours once shaped by dimmer cues. The eyes contain cells that help tell the brain about light for circadian timing, not just for sight. Light in the morning can be helpful. Light at night can delay the internal sense of night and make sleep feel farther away. The effect varies from person to person, and context matters. But the principle is clear enough: the body uses light as a clock, and modern life keeps moving the hands. The phone beside the bed is especially powerful because it combines light with social meaning. A lamp is just brightness, but a phone is brightness carrying the group. It may hold affection, work, crisis, entertainment, comparison, desire, and threat. The body does not merely see the screen, it anticipates what the screen might deliver. One message can reopen the social world. One headline can summon danger from far away. One video can extend attention beyond fatigue. Digital light is not only a circadian issue, it is a social and emotional stimulant arriving at the hour when the organism should be narrowing its circle. Night once reduced the world. The screen expands it again. Shift work reveals the mismatch in harsher form. Humans can work at night, and many must. Modern hospitals, transport systems, factories, emergency services, and global economies depend on people whose schedules oppose the sun. Their labour is essential, but the body often pays for living against its clock, eating at night, sleeping during the day, fighting light exposure at the wrong times, and trying to maintain social life while rhythms drift can strain mood, metabolism, and mental clarity. The evidence varies by occupation and individual, so careful scholars avoid turning risk into certainty for every person. Still, circadian disruption is one place where mismatch becomes easy to feel fatigue that does not lift, hunger at strange hours, sleep that refuses to deepen, alertness arriving when it is no longer useful. Even without shift work, the modern evening often loses its descent. Older nights likely had transitions finishing tasks, tending fire, sharing food, speaking in lower light, watching darkness gather, feeling temperature fall, hearing the world change its voice. The body had time to receive the message that day was closing. Modern evenings can jump from work to entertainment to messages to errands to bright rooms to bed with no real dimming of the mind. The nervous system remains open. It keeps processing, choosing, reacting, evaluating. Then the person lies down and wonders why sleep does not come like a switch. There is a lesser-known emotional side to darkness as well. Real night can feel unsettling because humans are visual animals and darkness reduces control. But safe darkness also teaches the body trust. It says nothing more needs to be watched for now. Artificial light protects, but permanent brightness may prevent that surrender. The stars disappear behind electrical glow, and with them goes one of the oldest scales of human perception. The night sky once widened thought beyond the immediate camp, beyond the day's labour, beyond the self. Light pollution does not only hide astronomy, it hides a form of humility. The answer is not to worship darkness or abandon light. Artificial light is one of civilization's great defenses against danger, isolation, and limitation. But mismatch thinking asks for rhythm rather than rejection, bright days and dim nights, morning light and evening descent, screens that know when to release the hand, work cultures that respect sleep as biological infrastructure, not laziness, homes that allow darkness to return, cities that protect safety without turning night into a permanent commercial noon. As the room finally dims, the ancient mind listens for signals older than language. It waits for the sun's absence to mean something again. It waits for the body to cool, for attention to narrow, for the group to fall quiet, for the world to stop demanding response. Sleep is not an escape from life. It is one of the ways life repairs its ability to continue. And in the digital age, perhaps one of the most radical acts is also one of the oldest to let night be night, and allow the mind, at last, to believe it. The refrigerator hums through the night like a private cave of abundance. Behind one door sit fruits from other continents, milk kept cold by invisible grids of power, meat cut by strangers, sauces engineered for intensity, leftovers sealed in plastic, and sweet things that would have seemed almost supernatural through most of human history. A few steps away, shelves hold grains, snacks, oils, powders, drinks, and packages printed with promises. Hunger no longer has to follow tracks. Seasons, weather, ripeness, migration, or luck. It only has to follow a hallway, open a cabinet, press a button, or answer the glow of an app. In the modern world, food waits without asking much of the body, and the ancient appetite approaches it with the seriousness of survival. This is one of the clearest places where mismatch becomes visible. The human body did not evolve in a world where calories were morally simple, medically measured, and commercially designed. It evolved in landscapes where energy mattered because energy was uncertain. Hunger was not a lifestyle inconvenience. It was a signal tied to movement, memory, risk, cooperation, and season. Sweetness could mean ripe fruit or honey. Salt mattered because it was not always easy to find. Fat carried dense energy. Protein supported repair and strength. Appetite was not foolish. It was an ancient intelligence shaped by the fact that missing energy could be dangerous. The modern food environment changes the meaning of that intelligence. It surrounds the body with foods that are unusually dense, soft, sweet, salty, fatty, fast, and easy to consume, often in combinations rarely found in nature. Ultra-processed foods are not merely foods that have been cooked, dried, fermented, ground, or preserved, because humans have processed food for a very long time. Grinding seeds, cooking tubers, smoking meat, fermenting plants, making bread, and storing food are ancient achievements. The modern category points to something more specific. Industrial formulations built from refined ingredients, additives, flavor systems, textures, and marketing designed for convenience, shelf life, and high reward. Scholars still debate definitions, mechanisms, and the relative weight of processing itself compared with nutrients, poverty, access, advertising, and overall diet. But the broad concern is no longer easy to dismiss. The surprising part is that the body's desire for these foods is not a failure of character. It is often the success of old systems under altered conditions. In scarcity, a strong pull toward energy-rich food helps survival. In abundance, the same pull can become a trap. The brain's reward circuits evolved to learn from pleasure because pleasure helped mark valuable things: food, warmth, connection, rest, safety, discovery. Modern food design can concentrate pleasure while reducing the effort once attached to it. A person can receive sweetness without climbing, fat without a hunt, salt without searching, variety without season, and softness without chewing much at all. The mouth receives signals of plenty. The body receives the consequences of too much, too often, too easily. There is a texture to this mismatch that matters. Many ancestral foods required work not only to obtain but to eat. Fibrous plants, tough meats, nuts, roots, seeds, and minimally processed grains can slow consumption through chewing and handling. They carry structure. Modern soft foods can be eaten quickly, sometimes before fullness signals have had time to arrive. The body has mechanisms for satiety, but those mechanisms operate across time: stretch, hormones, taste, nutrients, learned expectation, and context. When food is engineered to be rapidly eaten and intensely rewarding, the timing can be distorted. The mind may still want more before the body has had a chance to report enough. Scarcity also shaped memory. Humans remember food locations, preferences, and opportunities with unusual strength. A good fruiting tree, a reliable shellfish bed, a seasonal migration route, a safe water source, a place where tubers grow after rain. These were maps of survival. Today, Food memory is recruited by branding, packaging, advertising, street signs, delivery apps, and the familiar emotional comfort of certain tastes. The city becomes a landscape of edible cues. A person may not be hungry in the old physiological sense, yet the sight of a logo, the smell of frying oil, or the image of dessert can wake an appetite prepared by deep time to notice opportunity. The evidence remains incomplete about exactly how every cue works in every person, but the lived experience's widespread desire can be summoned from outside the body. Modern eating also detaches food from effort and community. In many older settings, food gathering, preparation, and sharing were social processes. Knowledge moved through hands. Meals carried relationship. Eating alone certainly happened, and scarcity could strain generosity. But food often belonged to a web of cooperation. In modern life, a person can eat while working, scrolling, driving, standing, or watching the lives of strangers. Food becomes fuel, entertainment, comfort, self-control, identity, rebellion, shame, medicine, and market signal all at once. The ancient hunger for nourishment becomes entangled with modern hunger for relief. Stress deepens the problem. When the body senses threat or social strain, it may alter appetite, craving, digestion, and energy storage. For some people, stress suppresses hunger. For others, it drives eating, especially foods rich in sugar, fat, and salt. In modern conditions, stress may be chronic, abstract, and unresolved. The difficult email, the financial pressure, the social comparison, the bad news, the loneliness at night, none are solved by calories in any direct sense. Yet food can briefly change feeling. It can soothe, stimulate, occupy, reward, or numb. Humans have always used food emotionally and socially. The mismatch is that modern comfort food is available constantly, privately, aggressively marketed, and designed to be powerful. Abundance is not equally distributed, and this must be said carefully. The modern food world contains both excess and insecurity. Some people face too many cheap calories and too little nutrition, while others face hunger, unstable access, or limited choice. Often, these conditions overlap. A neighborhood may be full of processed food and poor in fresh options. A family may have calories but not time, money, kitchen space, safety, or control. Mismatch does not erase economics. It intersects with it. To say that appetite evolved under scarcity is not to blame individuals for struggling in an environment arranged by industry, inequality, stress, and policy. The organism makes choices, but the landscape shapes which choices are easiest to make. The ancient mind also meets food through morality now. Modern culture often turns eating into a battlefield of virtue, clean or guilty, disciplined or weak, natural or poisoned, thin or failed, optimized or careless. This moral pressure can make the mismatch worse. Appetite is not a confession. Hunger is not a flaw. Pleasure in food is not an error in the human design. No single explanation fully accounts for obesity, metabolic disease, disordered eating, or modern dietary distress. Genes, sleep, stress, income, culture, medication, activity, marketing, and food systems all matter. But the mismatch lens helps explain why personal willpower so often feels outmatched by the room itself. The answer is not to recreate a Paleolithic menu, because there was no single menu to recreate, and many ancestral conditions were harsh. The more humane lesson is about fit, food that asks the body to participate, meals that slow down enough for satiety to speak, daily rhythms where hunger is not constantly provoked by advertisement and stress, food systems that make nourishment easier than impulse, shared eating that restores relationship, a world where taste remains pleasure, not a trap. In the quiet kitchen, the refrigerator keeps humming. It is a miracle and a danger, a shield against famine and a doorway into excess. The ancient appetite stands before it, with old instructions: seek energy, remember sweetness, value fat, do not ignore abundance, eat when food is here. Those instructions once helped keep people alive. In the digital age, they still speak with authority. But now abundance has learned to whisper in their language, and the body must learn a new wisdom in a world where survival is no longer only the search for food, but the search for limits. The body waits beneath the mind. It waits under the desk, folded into a chair, ankles still, hips fixed, shoulders rounded toward a screen, hands making tiny precise motions over keys and glass. Outside, vehicles carry other bodies through streets. Elevators lift them through buildings. Escalators pull them upward without effort. Food arrives by delivery. Water comes through pipes. Heat and cold are managed by machines. The human organism, descended from walkers, carriers, climbers, diggers, throwers, gatherers, makers, and wanderers, now passes much of life with its largest muscles silent. The strange part is that the body does not stop being ancient just because the room has become efficient. It keeps expecting movement to mean something. Movement in the older human world was not a hobby, a punishment, or a scheduled appointment with health. It was the medium through which survival unfolded. People moved to find water, follow animals, gather plants, reach stone sources, visit allies, avoid danger, seek shelter, carry infants protectively, transport food, collect fuel, and return to remembered places. Movement was not always intense, and it was not constant heroic exertion. Much of it may have been moderate, varied, practical, and woven through the day. Walking mattered enormously. So did squatting, kneeling, balancing, reaching, gripping, lifting, cutting, pounding, climbing, dragging, and resting. The body experienced effort as part of belonging to a landscape. Muscles were not isolated machines to be trained one at a time. They were participants in a living task. Modern life separates movement from necessity. This is a triumph in many ways. A person no longer has to walk miles for water or carry heavy loads through dangerous weather just to survive the day. Machines spare bodies from forms of labor that were exhausting, injuring, and sometimes impossible. Disability, illness, age, pregnancy, recovery, and ordinary fatigue are all made less punishing by technologies that reduce physical demand. The problem is not that comfort exists. The problem is that comfort can become total. When movement disappears too completely, the body loses one of the main languages through which it regulates itself. Muscle is not only for strength, it is an endocrine organ, a metabolic engine, a circulatory pump, a stabilizer of mood, a keeper of balance, a partner in insulin sensitivity, inflammation, bone maintenance, temperature, and sleep. When large muscles contract through daily life, they send signals far beyond the limbs. They tell the body that energy is being used, that blood must flow, that joints must remain nourished, that bones must keep their density, that the brain is moving through space. Sedentary life does not simply mean the absence of athletic achievement. It means the absence of repeated biological messages the body expects to receive. Scholars still debate the exact thresholds and best measures of sedentary risk, and the evidence varies across age, occupation, genetics, and lifestyle. Yet the broad pattern is difficult to ignore. A body built for movement does not thrive when movement becomes rare. There is a psychological dimension too. Walking changes thought. Across cultures and centuries, people have noticed that movement loosens memory, emotion, and attention. A path gives the mind sequence. The eyes shift distance. The vestibular system feels orientation. Breathing deepens. Problems that seem sealed indoors sometimes open slightly under a sky. This does not mean walking solves suffering, or that every distress is a failure to move. Mental health is far more complex than that. But the body and mind are not separate rooms. A nervous system that never travels, never changes pace, never feels weather on the skin, may lose access to forms of regulation that do not arrive through thinking alone. The chair is one of the quietest symbols of the mismatch. Sitting is not unnatural. Humans have always rested. They sat, crouched, leaned, squatted, knelt, lay down, and gathered in stillness. The issue is not sitting itself, but prolonged. Uniform sitting in the same posture for hours, repeated across years. In many traditional resting postures, the body still changes shape. Ankles flex, hips open, spines adjust, muscles hold low-level engagement. People rise and lower themselves from the ground. Modern chairs support the body so completely that support becomes immobilization. The back of the chair, the height of the desk, the screen at eye level, the car seat, the sofa, the airplane row, all create a world where the body is held in shapes it did not choose. Cars compress distance, but they also remove the slow knowledge of place. A walked route is remembered through slope, smell, sound, surface, corner, weather, and fatigue. A driven route may be known through traffic lights and impatience. Again, the car is not an enemy. It expands possibility, connects families, saves time, and makes modern economies function. But when every errand, commute, and visit becomes seated transport, landscapes become scenery rather than terrain. The body no longer learns the neighborhood through feet. It passes through space without fully entering it. Modern exercise tries to repair this loss, but it often does so by isolating movement from meaning. A treadmill asks the body to walk without arriving. A gym machine asks a muscle to push a weight without building, carrying, climbing, or escaping. These tools can be useful, even life-saving. They can restore strength, protect health, and give people control in environments that remove natural activity. But there is still something revealing about needing special rooms to imitate the movement civilization has engineered out of ordinary life. The body goes to a separate place to perform what life once required without naming it. One lesser-known detail is that varied low-level movement across a day may matter in ways that a single intense workout cannot fully replace. A person may exercise for an hour and still sit for 10. The body receives a burst of effort, then long silence. Older patterns likely included more frequent transitions, walking, stopping, kneeling, lifting, resting, carrying, watching, bending, rising. The metabolism of such a life is not the same as stillness interrupted by scheduled exertion. The evidence remains incomplete, and modern lifestyles differ widely. But mismatch thinking encourages attention to texture, not just totals. It asks not only how much movement, but what kind, how often, with what rhythm, and with what connection to the world. Movement also carries social meaning. Shared labour once synchronized bodies, People walked together, lifted together, prepared food together, repaired things together, danced, migrated, played, and rested in proximity. Modern movement is often solitary or commercialized. Even exercise can become another performance metric, another source of comparison, another proof of discipline displayed to others. Yet movement can also rebuild community when it returns in simpler forms: walking with someone, gardening, carrying groceries, cooking from scratch, dancing without measurement, tending a place, using hands to make or repair something. The ancient body does not require every movement to be primitive. It asks for movement to be alive. There is no need to romanticize hardship. Many ancient bodies suffered from physical stress, injury, infection, and wear. Many modern conveniences are merciful. The goal is not to return to a world where survival depends on exhausting labor. The goal is to notice that removing movement from survival did not remove the body's need for movement. It only made that need easier to ignore until it returns as stiffness, restlessness, fatigue, metabolic strain, poor sleep, low mood, or a vague sense of being trapped inside oneself. At the end of the day, the body rises from the chair and may feel older than it should, not because time has passed too quickly, but because too little has passed through it. The legs have carried almost no distance. The hands have touched almost no material world. The lungs have breathed shallow indoor air. The eyes have travelled farther than the feet, crossing continents through screens while the body remained in one room. Somewhere beneath the convenience, the Paleolithic mind still expects the day to include a path, a load, a slope, a tool, a change in light, a reason to stand. It is not asking for danger. It is asking for the simple proof of being embodied that life is not only something watched and managed, but something moved through. A body that has barely moved can still feel as if it has been running all day. This is one of the strangest signatures of modern stress. The muscles have not crossed a valley, climbed a ridge, carried water, or escaped anything with teeth and breath. Yet the heart has tightened. The jaw has clenched, the stomach has turned, and the mind has circled the same invisible dangers for hours. The threat is not standing at the doorway. It is in the calendar. It is in the bank account. It is in the unread message. It is in the performance review, the medical bill, the rent increase, the social comparison, the news alert, the quiet fear of falling behind. Modern life has learned to place danger where the body cannot reach it. The ancient stress response is not a design flaw. It is one of the reasons humans are here at all. When a real danger appears, the body must become faster than reflection. Attention narrows, blood pressure rises, glucose becomes available, muscles prepare. Pain may become less noticeable. Digestion may pause. The mind searches for action. In an older landscape, stress often demanded movement, coordination, hiding, fighting in adult conflict, fleeing, climbing, lifting, carrying, calling for help, or waiting in heightened stillness until the danger passed. The response was costly, but it had a purpose. It prepared the organism to survive a situation that could change quickly. Modern stress often keeps the preparation while removing the release. A deadline does not disappear because the body has flooded itself with readiness. Debt does not back away when adrenaline rises. A hostile comment online cannot be outrun. A job application does not resolve because the hands tremble. A news cycle can summon alarm from wars, disasters, markets, elections, scandals, and crises far beyond the person's direct control. the body is mobilized, but action is unclear. It is like drawing a bow and never being allowed to release the arrow. Over time, the strain is not only in the original problem, but in the repeated activation of systems meant for sharper, shorter emergencies. This is why chronic stress feels so different from immediate danger. Immediate danger has shape. It arrives, peaks, demands response, and may end. Chronic stress seeps. It becomes background. It sits beneath breakfast, follows into sleep, rides in the body during ordinary conversations. It can be made of many small pressures, none dramatic alone, but together they form a weather system. A person may not be able to name one great threat, only the sense that life is too tight, too fast, too exposed, and too uncertain. Scholars still debate how best to connect modern psychosocial stress to specific health outcomes, because lives are complex and stress is difficult to measure cleanly. But the broad pattern is hard to miss. A nervous system repeatedly asked to prepare for danger, without resolution, begins to pay a price. Competition is one of the old forces that modern life has enlarged. Human beings are cooperative creatures, but they also compare, compete, and monitor rank. In small groups, competition could exist around skill, generosity, knowledge, attractiveness, courage, alliances, ritual roles, and access to resources. Yet it was bounded by direct relationship and local memory. Modern competition is vast and abstract. A person may compete not only with neighbors or co-workers, but with entire markets, visible applicants, global talent pools, curated online lives, and standards produced by people they will never meet. The mind sees success everywhere and context nowhere. It is difficult to feel enough when the comparison group has become the whole world. Status anxiety grows in this expanded field. The ancient mind treats social standing as consequential because, in deep history, it often was. Being respected could bring support. Being distrusted could be dangerous to survival. Modern societies have transformed status into salaries, brands, credentials, titles, bodies, metrics, neighborhoods, experiences, and visible lifestyles. Some of these signs matter practically, others are symbolic, but the nervous system does not always separate them neatly. It may react to a lower number, a missed promotion, an ignored post, or a sign of someone else's success as if belonging itself has been threatened. No single explanation fully accounts for the ache of comparison, but Mismatch reveals why symbolic losses can feel physically real. There is also a peculiar modern stress in choice. Abundance does not always calm the mind. It can overload it. What to eat, where to live, whom to become, which career to pursue, which advice to trust, which risk to avoid, which identity to perform, which future to prepare for. Modern life often turns existence into a permanent menu. Choice is freedom, and freedom is precious. But too much choice can become a form of vigilance. Every option carries the ghost of regret. The mind evolved to decide under constraints that were often severe but visible. Now it must imagine countless possible lives while being judged for the one it selects. Information itself becomes a stressor when it loses scale. In a smaller world, news travelled at human speed through people who usually had some relation to the event. Modern news arrives instantly, repeatedly, and often emotionally sharpened. The body may encounter tragedy, outrage, threat, and uncertainty before stepping outside. It may learn about suffering in places it cannot help, dangers it cannot assess, and conflicts it cannot resolve. Compassion is pulled outward. Fear is pulled outward. Anger is pulled outward. The ancient moral and threat systems were not built for planetary awareness delivered in fragments between advertisements and personal messages. This does not mean people should become ignorant. It means attention needs boundaries because the nervous system has limits even when information does not. A lesser-known detail of stress is that uncertainty can be more exhausting than bad news. The mind can adapt to many difficult realities when it knows what they are. Waiting, however, keeps systems open. Waiting for results, replies, approvals, payments, diagnoses, decisions, renewals, judgments, and outcomes can hold the body in suspended readiness. The animal in the grass has not appeared, but the grass keeps moving. Modern institutions create vast amounts of waiting applications pending, claims processing, messages unanswered, algorithms deciding, markets shifting, policies changing. The individual waits beneath systems too large to see. The body still wants to know whether it is safe. Recovery is the missing half of the stress story. Humans are not meant to avoid all strain. Challenge can strengthen. Effort can build confidence. Short-term stress can focus the mind and organize action. The problem is stress without recovery, activation without completion, pressure without social buffering, and danger signals without clear bodily response. In older settings, recovery might come through shared rest, physical completion of a task, contact with trusted companions, sleep under darkness, rhythmic movement, ritual, laughter, grooming, storytelling, or simply the end of a visible threat. Modern recovery is often replaced by stimulation. After a stressful day, a person reaches for the same device that delivered much of the stress. The nervous system asks for relief and is given more input. The way forward is not to eliminate ambition, responsibility, news, or difficulty. A life without stress would not be a human life. The more important question is whether stress is paired with agency, meaning, movement, support, and closure. A difficult task can be tolerable when its purpose is clear. Competition can be energizing when it's fair and bounded. News can be necessary when it leads to understanding rather than helpless alarm. Work can be demanding when rest is protected. Social pressure can be softened by real belonging. The ancient stress system does not require a perfect world. It requires signals that danger has limits and that the body is not alone. In the quiet after a long day, the modern person may lie still while the mind keeps running. No animal follows, no storm breaks overhead, no enemy waits beyond the firelight. Yet the body remains alert, listening to invisible pressures moving through bank servers, inboxes, institutions, headlines, and imagined futures. This is stress without immediate escape. The old alarm system echoing through a world of abstractions, and beneath it, the Paleolithic mind still asks for something very simple. Show me the danger, show me the path, show me the people beside me, and show me when it is over. When strain becomes ordinary, the body begins to keep records, not in language, not in memory as the conscious mind knows it, but in blood pressure, sleep depth, glucose regulation, immune tone, inflammation, digestion, reproductive signaling, pain sensitivity, mood, and fatigue. The modern world often treats these as separate problems, each belonging to its own specialist room, its own prescription, its own chart. Yet the organism does not live in departments. It lives as one continuous system, receiving light, food, movement, stress, social contact, air, sleep, meaning, and uncertainty all at once. If those signals remain out of rhythm long enough, the gap between ancient expectation and modern condition may begin to show up not only as unease, but as disease. Evolutionary mismatch does not claim that every modern illness has one ancient cause. That would be too simple and too careless. Chronic disease is shaped by genes, income, education, pollution, food systems, medical access, pathogens, work conditions, trauma, sleep, culture, policy, age, and chance. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how much explanatory weight mismatch should carry in each case, but it offers a useful way to see patterns that otherwise look scattered. A body built for varied movement may struggle with prolonged sitting. A metabolism shaped under uncertain food availability may struggle with constant calorie-dense abundance. A circadian system tuned to sunlight and darkness may struggle under artificial light at night. An immune system shaped by microbial exposure, injury, season, and ecological contact may respond strangely in sanitized, polluted, sedentary, stressed environments. A threat system built for bursts of danger may wear itself down under chronic psychosocial pressure. Inflammation is one of the hidden languages of this story. It is not simply bad. Inflammation helps the body respond to injury, infection, and repair. Without it, survival would be impossible. But when inflammatory signaling remains elevated or poorly regulated, it can become part of a long-term burden. Modern lifestyles can feed that burden in many ways: poor sleep, air pollution, chronic stress, inactivity, certain dietary patterns, social isolation, and metabolic dysfunction. No single pathway explains everything, and it would be misleading to say that modernity simply causes inflammation as a single condition. Still, the idea of low-grade chronic inflammation has become one of the places where mismatch thinking feels especially powerful. The body is reacting as if repair or defense is always needed. Metabolic disease tells a similar story. Insulin, fat storage, appetite, liver function, muscle activity, and energy use evolved to help organisms survive changing supplies of food and effort. In a world of scarcity, storing energy is not foolish, it is protective. In a world where intense food is always nearby and movement is optional, the same protective systems can become strained. Muscles that rarely contract take up less glucose. Sleep disruption alters appetite and hormonal rhythms. Stress can shift eating patterns and energy regulation. Ultra-processed foods can make overconsumption easier before the body registers fullness. The result, for many people, is not a simple failure of will, but a body trying to manage signals that did not usually arrive together across evolutionary time: abundance without effort, stress without movement, light without day, fatigue without rest. The immune system may also be living through a confusing age. Older environments exposed humans to soil, animals, plants, smoke, parasites, bacteria, viruses, wounds, and seasonal variation. Some exposures were dangerous and remain dangerous. Modern sanitation, antibiotics, vaccines, clean water, and public health have saved vast numbers of lives. There is no serious argument for returning to the disease burdens of the past, but the immune system develops through contact with the world, and some researchers argue that certain modern environments may reduce or alter microbial exposures in ways that affect immune regulation. This idea is often simplified into popular claims, and the details are still debated. The careful version is more interesting. The immune system may need the right kinds of microbial and ecological signals, while still being protected from genuinely harmful pathogens. In other words, the question is not dirt versus cleanliness. It is ecological relationship versus biological isolation. Mental health belongs in the same web. Anxiety, depression, loneliness, burnout, attention problems, and emotional exhaustion cannot be reduced to mismatch alone. They arise from many causes, including personal history, social conditions, neurobiology, inequality, grief, illness, and life events. Yet mismatch helps explain why modern environments can press so heavily on systems of mood and meaning. Sleep disruption weakens emotional regulation. Social isolation removes buffering. Constant comparison distorts self-worth. Sedentary routines reduce embodied regulation. Processed food and metabolic strain may interact with mood. Chronic stress keeps threat systems active. News and digital platforms pull attention toward danger and status. The mind is not floating above the body, it is carried by it. A surprising detail is that many modern problems seem to share a rhythm problem. It is not only what happens, but when, how often, and without what recovery. Food late at night, light when the body expects darkness, work messages during rest, social judgment without face-to-face repair, stress without physical completion, sitting without interruption, entertainment without true downshift, information without integration. These are not dramatic injuries. They are small desynchronizations repeated until they become the background texture of life. The body may tolerate them for a long time, because humans are remarkably resilient. But resilience is not the same as invulnerability. There is also danger in using mismatch as a moral story. People suffering from chronic illness or mental distress do not need to be told they have failed to live naturally. Many live in environments where healthier choices are expensive, unsafe, inaccessible, or socially unsupported. Some work at night because society needs their labor or because their survival depends on it. Some eat what is affordable. Some live in noisy neighborhoods because housing choices are constrained. Some cannot simply walk in green spaces, sleep on a perfect schedule, or turn off stress. Mismatch is most useful when it points outward as well as inward. It asks how environments are built, who benefits from them, who bears their costs, and how human biology becomes entangled with social design. The careful limit is important. Mismatch is a framework, not a master key. It does not replace medicine, psychology, public health, or social analysis. It does not prove that every ancestral condition was healthy, or that every modern invention is harmful. It does not mean genes are destiny. It does not mean all people respond the same way to cities, screens, food, or stress. What it does offer is a way to see disease not merely as failure inside the individual, but as a conversation between the individual and the environment. Sometimes the conversation is supportive, sometimes it is confusing, sometimes it is hostile. The most humane version of this idea does not ask modern people to become ancient again. It asks modern worlds to become less biologically careless. A city can include quiet, shade, trees, walking paths, clean air, and real darkness. A workplace can allow recovery, trust, movement, and completion. A food system can make nourishment easier than manipulation. Digital tools can be designed to connect without constantly provoking status fear and attention capture. Medicine can treat disease while also asking why so many bodies are pushed toward the same breaking points. In the body's hidden record, the past is not a ghost story. It is an instruction manual written imperfectly by time, revised by culture, and tested each day against the conditions of the present. When the fit is poor, the body whispers first, then it aches, then it adapts as best it can. And if the signals remain wrong for long enough, the ancient organism may begin to show, cell by cell, rhythm by rhythm, that the modern world is not only something humans think about, it is something they metabolize. The same device that keeps the mind awake can also carry a voice across an ocean to someone who would otherwise be alone. The same network that feeds comparison can help a frightened person find others who understand. The same screen that scatters attention can teach a skill, preserve a memory, guide a lost traveller, translate a language, monitor a heartbeat, deliver therapy, or bring a face into view when distance would once have meant silence. This is why the story cannot end with technology as the villain. Human beings have always survived by extending themselves through tools, a stone blade, a needle, a boat, a hearth, a map, a book, a telescope, a vaccine, a radio, a computer. All are ways the human organism reaches beyond its naked limits. The digital age wounds because it touches ancient systems too intensely, but it can also heal because it touches the same systems at all. Technology is not outside human nature. It is one of human nature's clearest expressions. The hand that shapes a tool is not betraying biology. It is fulfilling a very old tendency to alter the environment instead of merely enduring it. Fire was technology, and it changed digestion, warmth, protection, social life, and night. Clothing was technology, and it allowed human bodies to enter climates they could not have tolerated bare. Boats were technology, and they turned coasts, rivers, and islands into pathways. Writing was technology, and it moved memory outside the skull. Agriculture was technology, though it brought both abundance and new burdens. Cities, clocks, printing, electricity, antibiotics, aircraft, and satellites all widened the human world. The problem is not technology itself. The problem is speed, scale, design, and whether the tool serves human rhythms or captures them. The modern phone is a perfect example because it is not one tool but many tools fused together. It is a map, clock, market, library, mirror, theatre, newspaper, bank, workplace, camera, archive, gaming hall, social arena, and alarm bell. Each function may be useful. Together, they become an environment. A hammer waits until it is picked up. A book waits until it is opened. A phone calls out. It asks to be checked, carried, charged, updated, answered, and watched. It brings the world into moments that were once protected by distance meals, beds, walks, silence, waiting rooms, grief, boredom, and the soft beginnings of sleep. What once would have been separate settings now collapses into one surface. Work enters rest. Strangers enter solitude. News enters the body before breakfast. Entertainment enters fatigue. The tool becomes weather. Yet weather can be managed. Digital tools can be designed differently, and people can use them differently. The evidence remains incomplete about which interventions work best for which people, and scholars still debate how much harm comes from screen time itself versus content. Context, displacement of other activities, social comparison, sleep disruption, and individual vulnerability. But this uncertainty should make the story more precise, not weaker. A video call with a loved one is not the same as doom scrolling alone at midnight. An online support group is not the same as a public ranking system built around approval metrics. A long educational documentary is not the same as an endless stream of fragments selected to provoke outrage. The medium matters, but so do timing, purpose, design, and the state of the person using it. The healing side of technology often appears when it restores older human needs in new forms. A person far from family can hear a familiar voice. Someone with a rare illness can find others who know the fear from inside. A remote worker can escape a damaging commute and regain time for sleep, movement, and family. A fitness tracker can remind a sedentary body to stand, walk, breathe, and notice patterns it had ignored. A light timer can help restore morning brightness and evening dimness. A meditation app can guide attention toward calm, though no app can substitute for a life with real recovery. A digital calendar can protect rest if it is used as a boundary rather than a cage. Technology becomes humane when it helps the organism recover rhythm, agency, and connection. There is a lesser-known possibility hidden here. The modern world can use advanced tools to recreate conditions that feel older, not by pretending to return to prehistory, but by understanding human needs more intelligently. Urban design can use data to map heat, noise, pollution, loneliness, and walkability. Architecture can bring daylight deeper into buildings. Work platforms can reduce unnecessary interruption instead of multiplying it. Social media could be built around smaller circles, slower sharing, and meaningful exchange rather than endless public comparison. Food systems can use logistics to make healthier options easier to obtain. Medicine can combine genetic knowledge, behavioral science, and environmental design to prevent illness before it becomes permanent. The same intelligence that built Mismatch can also recognize it. But this requires resisting one of technology's most seductive promises: frictionlessness. Many modern tools succeed by removing effort, delay, and limits. Food arrives without walking. Entertainment begins without waiting. Messages cross the world instantly. Purchases occur without handing over visible money. Work continues without leaving the bed. Frictionlessness feels like freedom, but some friction is biologically meaningful. Effort can regulate appetite. Delay can cool emotion. Distance can protect attention. Darkness can invite sleep. Waiting can create anticipation. Physical presence can deepen trust. Limits can turn endless possibility into a livable day. A world that removes every obstacle may also remove the structures that help the mind know when to stop. This is where design becomes moral. If a platform profits from attention, it may learn to inflame the very instincts that make attention hard to withdraw. If a food system profits from overconsumption, it may learn to intensify appetite beyond nourishment. If a workplace profits from availability, it may push work into every hour technology can reach. If a city values traffic flow over human movement, it may make walking feel like trespassing. These are not inevitable outcomes of invention. They are choices layered into systems until they feel natural. Mismatch is not only a biological accident, it can be manufactured, amplified, and sold. Still, human beings are not helpless before their tools. The same species that learn to carry fire can learn to contain the feed. The same mind that invented artificial light can rediscover darkness as a resource. The same culture that made work portable can decide that not every hour is available. The same technology that globalized comparison can be used to build small communities of trust. The task is not to reject the digital age, but to domesticate it more wisely. Humans domesticated plants and animals, but they have not yet fully domesticated their own machines of attention. In the glow of the device, then, there is no single prophecy. It can be a wound, a remedy, a trap, a bridge, a mirror, a weapon, a lantern, or a doorway. It depends on what ancient need it touches, whose interests shape it, and whether it returns the mind to life or pulls life into itself. The Paleolithic mind waking in the digital age does not need a world without tools. It has always been a tool-making mind. What it needs is a world where tools remember the body that uses them, a body that sleeps, hungers, walks, worries, loves, tires, heals, compares, belongs, and breaks when every signal becomes too much. A more human world does not have to look ancient. It does not need to trade hospitals for caves, cities for forests, or digital maps for memory of stars. The point of mismatch thinking is not to kneel before the past as if deep time were a moral authority. The past was not designed for comfort, justice, longevity, or happiness. It was a field of survival, full of beauty and danger, cooperation and loss, skill and uncertainty. But the past did shape the organism that now moves through apartment towers, office corridors, supermarkets, traffic, inboxes, and glowing rooms after midnight. If the modern world often feels misaligned, then the question becomes less nostalgic and more practical. How can a technological civilization be designed around the animal that actually lives inside it? The first answer is rhythm. Human life becomes more tolerable when the day has a shape the body can read. Morning light matters not because it is poetic, but because the body uses it as information. A day that begins with real brightness, movement, and some contact with the outside world speaks differently to the nervous system than a day that begins in dim rooms and immediate digital pressure. Evening matters for the same reason. A world that allows the lights to lower, messages to slow, work to end, and darkness to regain some authority is not primitive. It is intelligent. Circadian health is not a luxury for people with perfect schedules. It is biological infrastructure. Scholars still debate the precise effects of different kinds of light and routines, but the broad principle is strong enough to guide design bright days, dimmer nights, and fewer false sunrises in the palm of the hand. Cities can be built with this rhythm in mind. A more human city does not need to be small, silent, or rustic. It needs breathable air, walkable distances, shade, trees, water, public spaces, safe crossings, quieter zones, and places where people can meet without having to buy something. It needs buildings that admit daylight without turning rooms into ovens, streets that invite bodies to move, and neighborhoods that allow ordinary errands to become short walks rather than logistical campaigns. Green spaces are not decorative patches added after the real city is finished. They are part of the body's regulatory environment. Parks, gardens, riversides, courtyards, and tree-lined streets give attention a different texture. They remind the nervous system that the world contains patterns not made entirely by demand. Noise deserves the same seriousness. A civilization that treats constant mechanical sound as the price of progress may underestimate what it is asking of the body. Quiet is not emptiness, it is recovery. The older mind does not need absolute silence, but it does need relief from persistent alarm-like signals. Better building materials, traffic planning, public transport, green buffers, and limits on unnecessary noise are not aesthetic preferences alone. They are health design. No single explanation fully accounts for how urban sound shapes mood and stress across every population. But anyone who has stepped from a roaring street into a quiet courtyard understands that the body registers the difference before language arrives. Work can also be redesigned around the human organism, instead of around the fantasy of endless cognitive output. The mind is not a machine that becomes more productive simply because communication becomes faster. It needs blocks of attention, visible progress, trusted collaboration, pauses, and completion. A humane workplace understands that interruptions have costs, that meetings are not always cooperation, that availability is not the same as commitment, and that rest is not an enemy of seriousness. It allows people to move, to look away from near screens, to finish tasks before new ones invade, and to experience the end of work as an actual boundary. This is not softness. It is a recognition that attention is a living system, not an infinite warehouse. Food systems offer another place where the environment can stop fighting the body. It is unrealistic and unfair to tell individuals to defeat entire industries with willpower. Appetite evolved to notice energy, pleasure, convenience, and cues of abundance. A more human food environment would make nourishing meals easier, cheaper, more available, and more socially normal than the most manipulative alternatives. It would protect people, especially those under stress and time pressure, from having every hunger signal met by engineered excess. This does not require hatred of pleasure. Quite the opposite. It asks food to become pleasurable in ways that still allow the body to hear fullness, nourishment, and satisfaction. Shared meals, slower eating, cooking skills, better access, and less aggressive marketing all matter because they reshape the landscape in which choice occurs. Movement should return to the day without needing to become a performance. The body does not only need workouts, it needs ordinary motion woven into life. Stairs that are visible and pleasant, streets safe enough to walk, homes and workplaces that allow standing, stretching, carrying, bending, and change in posture. Schools, offices, and public places that do not treat stillness as the default proof of discipline. Movement becomes sustainable when it is useful, social, and frequent, not only when it is measured. The older body is not asking everyone to become an athlete. It is asking not to be stored. Social life may be the hardest to redesign because modern freedom and modern loneliness often come from the same source. People can leave inherited communities, choose identities, migrate, explore, and form bonds across distance. These freedoms matter, but the social brain still needs stable, reciprocal, embodied connection. A more human world creates chances for repeated contact neighborhoods with shared spaces, workplaces that do not isolate everyone into private digital tunnels, local groups, rituals, meals, walks, care networks, and slower forms of friendship. Online communities can support this, but they are strongest when they deepen life rather than replace it. The aim is not to force everyone into one model of belonging. It is to make belonging less accidental. Mental health care, viewed through Mismatch, becomes both personal and environmental. Therapy, medication, crisis support, and clinical treatment can be essential, and mismatch thinking should never be used to dismiss them. But it also asks what conditions keep producing distress at scale. Are people sleeping in rhythm with their bodies? Are they chronically isolated? Are they living under constant comparison? Are they eating in ways that destabilize mood and energy? Are they allowed to move? Do they have agency at work? Are they exposed to noise, pollution, and insecurity without recovery? The evidence remains incomplete in many details, but the direction is humane, treats suffering inside the person, while also changing the world pressing upon them. The danger is turning mismatch into another self-improvement burden. Modern people are already surrounded by instructions: optimize sleep, track food, control attention, manage stress, build community, exercise, meditate, reduce screen time, improve posture, breathe properly, become disciplined, become calm. If mismatch becomes only another list of personal tasks, it repeats the error. The deeper lesson is that environment should carry more of the load. Good design makes healthier patterns easier, not heroic. It lowers the cost of alignment. It lets the body succeed without constant self-command. A more human world, then, is not anti-modern. It is modernity with memory. It keeps medicine, science, art, equality, communication, and invention, but asks them to bend toward the organism they serve. It remembers that people need daylight and darkness, food and limits, work and completion, connection and privacy, stimulation and quiet, movement and rest, freedom and belonging. The Paleolithic mind does not need a museum built around it. It needs a future that understands it is still here, still listening beneath the noise, still capable of wonder, and still waiting for the modern world to speak in a rhythm old enough to feel like home. The feeling of being out of place may be one of the most important signals modern life produces. It is easy to mistake that feeling for personal failure, as if the individual should simply adapt faster, focus harder, sleep better, eat cleaner, work smarter, compare less, worry less, and remain calm beneath a sky of artificial demands. But a human being is not a detached mind operating a biological machine. A human being is a living inheritance, carrying rhythms and sensitivities shaped by time far deeper than any office, city, platform, or market. When that inheritance feels strain, it may not be refusing the present. It may be reporting that the present has been built without enough memory of the body. The ancient mind still listening inside modern consciousness is not a single primitive voice. It is a layered system of old needs and newer adaptations, instinct softened by culture, biology reshaped by learning, childhood, habit, society, and imagination. It can write code, read poetry, understand satellites, grieve through video calls, fall in love across distance, build hospitals, and dream of other planets. Yet it still responds to light, hunger, movement, touch, safety, shame, status, danger, fatigue, belonging, and silence. This is not contradiction. This is what humans are deep-time organisms capable of astonishing modernity, but never free from the conditions that make life biologically meaningful. The mismatch story has been told in many fragments. The city replaces the landscape. The screen becomes an artificial tribe. Work loses its material ending. Light continues after sunset. Food becomes abundant beyond old appetite. Movement disappears from ordinary survival. Stress loses its visible enemy. Disease appears in the gap between inherited systems and altered conditions. Technology becomes both wound and remedy. None of these fragments explains everything. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how strongly each thread connects to mental health, chronic illness, loneliness, sleep, attention, and well-being. But together they reveal a pattern too persistent to ignore. Modern life often asks ancient regulatory systems to operate in environments that scramble their signals. This does not mean humans are doomed by their past. The same species that feels mismatch is also the species that can notice it. That may be the most hopeful part of the story. A deer confused by headlights cannot redesign the highway. A moth circling a lamp cannot pass lighting policy. But humans can study the gap between organism and environment, then change the environment. They can decide that a good city is not merely efficient, but breathable. A good workplace is not merely connected, but rhythmic. A good technology is not merely engaging, but humane. A good food system is not merely profitable, but nourishing. A good social world is not merely visible, but trustworthy. A good modern life is not a rejection of progress, but progress made answerable to the creature it serves. The deepest lesson may be that humans are not meant to live by stimulation alone. The mind needs mystery, but not constant alarm. It needs information, but not endless interruption. It needs connection, but not permanent exposure. It needs food, but also satiety. It needs light, but also darkness. It needs effort, but also completion. It needs freedom, but also rootedness. It needs future, but also rhythm. Civilizations often measure themselves by what they can overcome: distance, darkness, disease, hunger, weather, silence, slowness. Yet sometimes what is overcome also carried forms of regulation. Darkness taught the body to release the day. Distance protected attention. Effort gave hunger meaning. Local community gave reputation context. Season gave time a shape. Silence allowed the mind to hear itself. There is a strange humility in this. Human beings built the digital age, but they did not build themselves from nothing. Beneath the newest systems are older systems, and beneath those are older ones still. The pulse that rises at a message, the comfort of a familiar voice, the calm after walking under trees, the ache of loneliness, the pull of sweetness, the relief of morning light, the need to be seen by trusted eyes, all are small fossils of living function. They are not sentimental weaknesses. They're evidence that the past did not vanish when the modern world arrived. It became embodied. The story of a Paleolithic mind waking in the digital age is not the story of a mind trapped in the wrong century. It is the story of a mind surrounded by inventions powerful enough to reshape its environment faster than its deeper rhythms can follow. That mind can adapt. But adaptation should not mean endless self-denial under conditions designed to exploit its vulnerabilities. It should mean building worlds where the old human needs are not treated as obstacles to productivity, consumption, or speed. It should mean remembering that progress without fit can become another form of exile. As the modern day closes, the ancient mind does not ask to abandon electricity, medicine, language, art, cities, or the astonishing reach of human knowledge. It asks for a place inside them. It asks for daylight that reaches the skin, darkness that is allowed to return, work that ends, tools that serve, food that nourishes, movement that belongs to the day, and people who are present beyond signals. It asks for a world where the nervous system does not have to mistake ordinary life for a permanent emergency. And perhaps when people feel out of place, that feeling is not proof that they are broken. Perhaps it is the old mind still doing its work, quietly comparing the world it receives with the world a human body can bear, and asking civilization to remember the human being at its center. The room grows quieter now. The screens may still glow, the city may still breathe through wires, engines, pipes, and towers, but the older rhythm remains beneath it all, patient as stone. Long before names, nations, clocks, or passwords, human beings woke under changing skies and tried to understand where they stood in the world. They watched weather gather over distant ground. They carried fire through darkness. They listened for one another in the night. They survived not because they were separate from the world, but because they were joined to it by attention, need, memory, and care. That older story has not ended. It has only become harder to hear. It speaks now through tired eyes after too much light, through the sudden peace of trees after traffic, through the warmth of real conversation after too many signals, through the body's relief when it moves, rests, eats slowly, and remembers that it is alive. It speaks through unease too, through the quiet knowledge that a faster world is not always a wiser one, and that the human future cannot be measured only by what becomes possible. Every age leaves something behind. The Paleolithic left stone tools, pigments, footprints, hearths, bones, and traces of vanished camps. The digital age will leave servers, satellites, plastics, archives, and signals scattered through time. But the most fragile record is always the human one, how it felt to live, to belong, to fear, to hope, to be overwhelmed, to adapt, to endure. Much of that record disappears almost as soon as it is lived. Still, something continues. The ancient mind wakes again tomorrow, perhaps in a room of artificial light, perhaps beside a phone already waiting, perhaps in a city far from any wild horizon. Yet somewhere inside it remains the memory of dawn, the need for a trusted face, the wisdom of fatigue, the pull of the path, the comfort of darkness, and the old desire to find a place in the world that feels real. And in that small, persistent listening, across all the noise of the modern age, the human story goes on.